Ladies and gentlemen, pay attention. This is your boy, the Coach, from the WWE. I would like to welcome you to the very first wrestling podcast in the world to take you on a weekly deep dive into classic matches along with legends of the squared circle. Enjoy the discussion. Enjoy the back and forth. There's so much to get into. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Payoff.
Oh yeah, it's the Payoff. It's Tom, it's Jeff, and we're gonna cover the Macho Man and the Heartbreak Kid. Jeff, how are you doing today, my friend?
Your impersonation is getting better and better every week, my friend. That was quite good. Good job.
All right, so this is something that was unexpected. Let me lead off and tell the story. So, as some of you may have saw on Twitter recently, there was a clip that was floating around. I say this like it was widespread. I may have been the only person to see it, but I saw a clip pop up in my feed. And the clip was about 2.5 minutes of Randy Savage against Shawn Michaels in 1992. Now, I think I knew they had worked together, so it wasn't like, oh, I can't believe they had a match. That wasn't the thing that shocked me. What shocked me was the highlights of this thing were like out of this world incredible. So I immediately sent it to Jeff, and he's like, holy shit. And I said, so then I started looking. I'm like, oh, I found the whole match on, I believe it was Daily Motion. And I was like, dude, we have to cover this. Consequently, as we did our research, I found out this was actually on the network. So the match we're going to cover today is on the network, but we have not seen the entire match. We just both saw some clips, and I think we both had the same reaction, which was, holy shit, this looks like an awesome match. So I guess that covers a few things, why we're covering it and why we wanted to cover it. So again, from my perspective, it was like we found this hidden gem, and I do want to start doing this sometimes. Like I don't want to waste time on shitty matches that, oh, I didn't realize that happened, and it's like a 4-minute TV match. But in a case like this where you never really saw these guys work, from all indications, this is going to be a absolutely fantastic match, and there's a lot to talk about around it. So I think this is going to make a great episode and be a little bit different than us covering the WrestleMania match that everyone's seen before and everyone knows the backstory of. So I'm excited about this, as you can tell, Jeff. What about you?
Yeah, it's just different. And I think you kind of hit the nail right on the head pretty good of just like, it was one of those where, again, you always think like, oh, of course, like at some point HBK and Randy Savage had to have some kind of, I say program together or some matches together that were kind of a little bit bigger. But this was one that I think that we just didn't really, I don't know, the slip through the cracks isn't even the right way to say it, but it's just one of those where like we saw it and we were both kind of excited about it because it's like, oh shit, like, and not just, you being HBK Supermarket, well, it really is one of those that even we had to dig a little bit to find it on the network. And so,
well, and think about this, 1992, I mean, this never saw the light of day in the United States. Maybe there was a VHS release, but it's not like it was on a network. It's not like it was SummerSlam 92 from Wembley Stadium and you could order it in the US, right? So it's if it didn't occur on TV or on pay-per-view in the United States, it's like it didn't even exist. And, you think about like now with like the Saudi Arabia stuff, if it were 1992, it would have never existed, right? They would have done these big-ass house shows, if you will, maybe broadcast it on TV there. Now it's like they're doing that. Oh, but then they're putting it on the network. So it's like it kind of does exist, and it kind of does need to fit and make sense before or after WrestleMania. So it's a lot different than this, which was, again, a UK-only pay-per-view. And it's not even like, 98 when they were doing UK-only pay-per-views and you knew what happened and they'd have to acknowledge it on TV, right? You knew, oh, Shawn beat Davey Boy for the European Championship. Okay, so we know that actually happened even if we didn't see the match and maybe there were clips on the internet. But again, in 92, it's like these European tours and what happened overseas, I mean, it didn't exist, right? I mean, I bet most of this, if not all of it, was not even acknowledged on TV. The other interesting thing, so the story that's made its rounds is, when Macho Man was put out the pasture and Vince was like, look, we're going younger. Hogan was gone. Savage, you're going to be an announcer. They were trying to do this youth movement. the story was, hey, around WrestleMania 10, Savage is like, look, I want to work a program with Shawn Michaels. And he had this whole thing mapped out. So I'd always heard that. I'm like, well, it made sense, right? I mean, Shawn was a great worker. He was an up-and-coming star. He was the future of the business. I get why Savage would want to work with him. What I didn't realize was they had already worked together. So my thinking was, this match takes place right after WrestleMania 8, all right? And then, Savage probably said, look, we have this incredible chemistry and we could have this incredible, kind of 2-year run. So it wasn't just based on Savage's hunch. It was actually based on Savage saying, no, we're having these great matches. And we could, I'm sure he's thinking if those two wrestled at WrestleMania 10, they'd have the best match in the history of WrestleMania at that point. So really interesting stuff here. Anything else you want to add before we jump into things?
No, I've got some details about when it was on TV. And so it was months later, but we got all kinds of good stuff. Yes.
Yeah, we'll cover that. So as always, thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for the 5 stars. Thanks for hitting us on social media. We couldn't do this without you, or we could, but no one would listen. So we've had a very loyal audience for a year now, and we appreciate you continuing to listen. And the only other thing we'll ask of you is, share what we're doing. So, liking things, commenting on things, and sharing things on social media, wherever you follow what we're doing, that's a massive help to us, and we greatly appreciate it. So, Jeff, let's go ahead and get into the build.
Oh, it's time for the build.
So, UK Rampage 1992. Jeff, had you ever heard of these Rampage pay-per-views prior to this week?
That prior to you sharing that tweet with me? No.
Yeah, me neither. Not that I'm shocked that they did them. I just had never heard. I vaguely remember like the Rampage tour and them doing the UK stuff following WrestleMania. What I didn't realize is they had these shows, right? And so I'll just quickly give you some backstory on it. The first one took place, and this is the first kind of WWF UK event. They did this inaugural UK Rampage in 1989. It was headlined by new champion Hulk Hogan against former champion Randy Savage. That's 89, okay? And that takes place at the London Arena. It broadcast on Sky One. And so, again, from my research, it says it was the first live event in the UK that the WWF did, which is crazy to think about because of how popular they would become and probably already were at this time. So they do this thing in 89. Then they do it again in 91. Okay, so 91, you'll remember, that's Hogan Slaughter territory. So Hogan's your world champ and Slaughter's challenging for the world championship. That one would take place in April of 91. So then we get to 92, which is what we're covering. Again, they do this in April of 92. It's in the Sheffield Arena in Sheffield, England. We'll run through the card, but Randy Savage is your world champ defending against Shawn Michaels. That's in the middle of the card. The main event of this show, probably because we're in England, is the British Bulldog and Erwin R. Shyster. So that's kind of interesting. And again, they're bounced. Go ahead.
The British Bulldog taking down the American government on that one. The tax man. There you go. Yeah, that match does kind of funny. Yeah.
Well, and what's probably also funny about it? Like, I doubt that in the UK, there's a couple of things funny about this. Number one is in the UK, they probably don't call it the Internal Revenue Service. Okay, so like IRS means nothing there. They probably have their own version of it. Okay. Number two is I remember as a kid. So I think Vince McMahon sometimes thinks, and I've heard this, and this may have been Meltzer that said it, but the WWF is written for an audience of one, and that audience is Vince McMahon, right? So a couple of classic examples of this are Erwin R. Shyster, right? Dude, how old was I when I was watching this shit? I'm 92. I'm 8 years old. Okay. You think I knew what the hell the IRS was Or, oh gosh, like, we're overtaxed as a country. God, this guy's a heel. I'm going to boo the shit out of him, right? Like, but Vince probably thought it was funny, and it's IRS. You get it? That's his initials. Like, it's like Lex Luger with a narcissist. Like, what 8-year-old kid knows what a narcissist is, right?
Right. Well, a quick Google search, and Twitter will let me know if I'm wrong here. The equivalent of the U.S. Internal Revenue System in the United Kingdom is Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs Office, the
That's
HMRC. Awesome. So Twitter can let me know what it might actually be called. That's just a quick search for kind of us sitting here. But yeah, IRS, what the hell does that mean?
Yeah. So again, it's just funny for a few reasons. All right. So let's talk about this UK Rampage 92. Again, they're bouncing around on different channels. This particular one aired live on Sky Movies Plus. So Sky, as our UK listeners would tell us, is kind of like the big network over there. They've got a few different variations of channels. This happened to air live on Sky Movies Plus. So it's kind of a premium event, if you will, not traditional pay-per-view, but a pay television network. So this event was the final of this European Rampage tour. So they have these shows throughout Europe, and then this is the final one. It's this special UK Rampage show. So we have 8,000 people in the Sheffield Arena. Let's talk about this card. There's a lot of interesting things happening. Tatanka is going to open up the show and beat Skinner. That would go 12 minutes. Then we have the Legion of Doom defeating, how's this for a tag team? Colonel Mustafa and Dino Bravo. 4-minute match, obviously a squash. Legion of Doom pounding them.
Love Legion of Doom.
Then we have.
Never had the padded spikes, but love me some Legion of Doom.
Then we have Sid Justice, who is accompanied by Harvey Whippleman, defeating The Undertaker by countout. That would only go 5 minutes. So, this is Sid coming off the WrestleMania 8 match with Hogan. They give him the final spot of the show. He's going to be gone soon. Man, 92 is just a crazy-ass time in wrestling, and we'll talk more about it when we watch this match. But, dude, you sit on the way out. Warrior's back, but then Warrior's gone soon after. A bunch of title flip-flops, which they never ping-ponged the world title around, but they did in 92. You have Savage. Then you have Hogan taking a long hiatus. It was just a wild, wild time. So then we have Savage and Shawn wrestling. We're going to watch a 16-minute match between those two, which, man, I'm so pumped about. Then the Mountie defeating Virgil in 9 minutes. Then the Intercontinental Champion Bret Hart defeating Rick the Martel in a 13-minute match. Our second to last match is Jim Duggan defeating the Repo Man by DQ, 7-minute match. Again, what's with these DQs countouts? Like, what, are we protecting the Repo Man? I mean, come on. And then finally, the main event, the British Bulldog defeating IRS, who's accompanied by Jimmy Hart. So there you go. That was a 13-minute match. That's your UK Rampage 92. Jeff, what do you think of that card?
A lot of, definitely has some, if you kind of put yourself in the time when that was happening, definitely has a lot of that feel good house show matches with kind of who was winning and things like that. I think the only one that kind of sneak in, the Randy Savage and Shawn Michaels, like that one could kind of be, like what, just interesting how that one was and kind of what was playing out at the time. Funny to think too about like Sid Justice beating the Undertaker, even though it was count out in like 5 minutes. I just find that almost comical, especially nowadays, kind of just, the Undertaker being what he was versus what he was in 92. But especially for the time, a lot of big names on the card. I think it's hard to deny that, of just like, it would have been fun to go to this show, especially if you weren't ever really getting shows in the UK, to see all these people, like, absolutely be worth it. Good stuff.
Well, and I think Eric Bischoff brought this up on his podcast, but and I thought was fascinating, but keep in mind that like in 1992, these guys didn't all have Twitter accounts. They didn't all have Instagram pages. Celebrities in really kind of pre-social media, they weren't accessible, and it's like this weird dynamic now where when you meet a wrestler. So, Steve Austin, you meet him at an autograph signing. It's like, yeah, I've never met him in person before, but I've listened to his podcast. I've seen his social media posts. You feel so familiar with these people. But back in 92, it's like it was a big deal to see these people in person. It's like that Michael Jordan documentary that's out now when he went to France. Like it was just, you saw them in person. It was a major deal. Now it's like not as crazy. But so to your point, Jeff, I mean, kind of cool. I mean, in person, you're seeing the Legion of Doom. You're seeing Sid, The Undertaker, the Macho Man, Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, the Bulldog, right? So, yeah, there's a lot of star power on this show for sure. So I know that this wasn't like a massive storyline or build, but how what are Randy Savage and Shawn Michaels doing to this point, and how did they get paired together?
Yeah. And so just kind of interesting how this played out is like you said a little bit at the beginning there, we had, really the young guy in Michaels and then kind of the old guard in Randy Savage here. And so Michaels had really just within the last year debuted as the Heartbreak Kid back in 1992 at this point. It was, within that year. This was after the Rockers had broken up. And so this was, of course, the just infamous, incredible, can't forget it barbershop moment of Shawn Michaels super kicking Marty Jannetty and throwing him through the glass window in the barbershop. So,
No. That's actually incorrect. And I hate to. I know you do your best with this research, and I know we try to be accurate. Marty jumped through the window.
Oh, I apologize. Yes. That was
the classic Bobby Heenan. Oh, look at Marty. He tried to escape.
that I did. And I apologize to our listeners that my research did not, I have the incorrect information there, but yeah. So either way, we can't deny there was a super kick and super fan Tom Marty.
One of the best angles of all time, man. I'm telling you, that was, God, some of those, and I mean, that's one of them. I think about like Hogan and Andre on the Piper's Pit. Gosh, there's just some of those, I don't know. I miss it. And I know we often romanticize about the past year on the payoff, but God, man, some of that stuff, like, I mean, still to this day, like what tag team breakup is better than that? I mean, it was just so good. I mean, they planted the seeds of it. You kind of saw it coming, but then, man, was that good? So sorry to interrupt.
Hey, no, that's okay. We want to bring the correct information to our fans. So would have been, it was actually WrestleMania 8, which was April 5th. This kind of UK Rampage event was April 19th. So that WrestleMania 8, Michaels, it was actually his first pay-per-view singles match. He had some tag stuff, some everything to go, but his first match as a singles competitor, he beat Tito Santana in that one. And this was, of course, after another, the infamous Michaels the double elimination. They had a double elimination in the Royal Rumble between the two of them, kind of eliminating each other. It was the kind of angle that they were playing up on that one. So it's just kind of interesting how that was, a thing and happening. So with that, though, of course, you have just really a couple weeks later, and kind of Michaels, like you said, kind of proving himself as the young guy, kind of trying to put them over. That he had failing to kind of win the championship belt from Randy Savage, he was going to get this opportunity at UK Rampage to compete for it. So like I said, this was April 1992. Wasn't a ton of build. It was primarily, like I said, just because Michaels had very quickly become just a kind of a, the big name as being the young guy. And so they were going to put him in that promotion. Like you said, Macho Man coming off of that big match with Ric Flair, which I'll talk about this a little bit in the aftermath, this Mania 8. There was a little bit of back and forth there. And then also the aftermath, I have to talk, bring up Miss Elizabeth too. There was some behind the scenes things happening too, in real life, actual shoot stuff that they were dealing with. So a little bit more in the aftermath here. So not a giant build, but just kind of a good match that we got to, because both guys kind of, really Michael's kind of coming up, giving him the opportunity as the kind of young gun to see what he can do. So good stuff though. So Tom, I know you have some thoughts though.
Yeah, just a couple other things. And, it's funny because as we were looking at WrestleMania 8, there were two things that I did kind of a deep dive on because I wanted to refresh my memory a little bit and involving both these guys. So Savage wins the title over Flair, right? So Flair only has that couple month run. My guess is at that time it was still the, babyface needs to win the world title, but especially because of where they situated that. And I love Savage winning the title. And obviously Savage is one of my all-time favorites. And the more Savage stuff we watch now, the more I continue to become a bigger fan of his, as crazy as that sounds, even all these years later, I just continue to appreciate it more and more. But man, I just, maybe you have Flair keep the belt throughout the year as opposed to bouncing it on to Savage, for that second reign. So, we originally thought we were going to get that Hogan-Flair match at WrestleMania 8, which we should have. Hogan was taking that break, so he wasn't going to win the title. Hogan must pose, so I think they just booked themselves into this corner where they had to keep Flair and Hogan apart. Plus they had done all the house show matches. So the novelty of it wore off. There was that burnout. And then, there was some, obviously the Hogan steroid stuff I was reading about. I don't know if there's any truth to this or not, but then there was some like Hogan cocaine stuff. That's what Keller was speculating at the time. So it just seemed like Hogan was taking a break. He was a little toxic. So he wasn't going to win the world title at this show. So then you had to separate Hogan and Flair. So then what babyface is going to beat Flair? They end up giving it to Savage. So it's just a weird time. And we'll talk more about that. The other dream match other than Hogan and Flair that we wish we would have got at WrestleMania 8, at least in my mind, was the original plan for Shawn Michaels, which was him and Marty Jannetty. And we didn't get that match because Marty was fired for drugs again. So, it was just interesting. Instead of Hogan and Flair and then Shawn and Marty, which both would have been incredible matches, we didn't get either of them. So just something interesting there as well. So, Jeff, let's get to this match. It's on the network. All right. So like I said, it's on Daily Motion if you want to stream it. We're going to start this with Savage having just entered the ring. We're at the 43-minute mark of UK Rampage 1992. So if you're trying to find it on the network, search for UK Rampage 1992, and then hit the 43-minute mark of the show, which is Randy Savage coming into the ring. So, Jeff, anything else you want to add before we jump into this one?
Let's rock and roll, my friend. I'm excited.
Let's rock and roll. It is time for the payoff.
Oh, it's time for the payoff.
All right. Liz, her final WWF appearance. What an interesting side note to this one.
Yeah, and this is one, and of course you got Michaels with the sensational Sherry as well too.
Oh, I love it. That's one of the things that's so great about this match is you have the contrast of the two women, right? You've Sherry, who used to manage Savage, Liz, who's now back with Savage. So I don't know how much they talk about that on commentary, but this is only a year removed from Savage losing his retirement match to the Warrior, the big teary Liz returns things. They get Sherry out of the ring. Now Sherry's repackaged with Shawn, and here you go, the heel Shawn Michaels and getting run off by Savage. Did you like Savage's ring attire better at this point or when he wore the short trunks and no shirt?
So you and I made the comment just before we started recording, and we were kind of finding our timestamp on this stuff of I am very much digging the leopard or tiger print yellow and red that he's got in the full suit right now. I think that's a good look for him.
Yeah, it wasn't bad. And I could see, Savage was so paranoid. I can see him thinking that like his body wasn't good enough at this point to wear a shirt, to go shirtless or something. I'm sure he still looked fantastic, but.
And the tassels on the arm, of course, you can't forget that. So just interesting. And of course, and this was Michaels too. One thing I want to point out is we're kind of like, he hadn't really found the gimmick yet. And so, he was, knew that he was going to, probably knew that he had big things on the horizon, where he was heading and things like that. But it didn't really fully establish the kind of heartbreak kid at this point. Wasn't a thing that, everybody knew. And, it was really coming into itself at this point too.
Well, yeah, and so you figure. So remember, the timeline here is Davey Boy is going to win the Intercontinental title off of Brett at SummerSlam '92 in Wembley, so they'd be back there sooner than later. And then that fall, Shawn's going to win over the Bulldog for his first IC title win. So this is before Shawn had even won the Intercontinental title. But he's getting world title shots because he had a world title shot later in the year, I believe, as well. But anyway, so I mean, just a fast action match already.
Look at him selling the shit out of these turnpost bumps, though. Like, just literally bouncing off the top turnbuckle as Macho Man's hitting his head into it. Just fantastic. Sherry checking up on him.
Earl Hebner, the referee. Savage throwing a chair in the ring. Just great, right? And of course, it's like the padded chair. It's before they had the gimmick chairs. They would use real chairs.
Right. So one kind of little interesting thing, and one of my points here is this was a time in WWF, WWE, however you want to, at the time, where the world title was not necessarily defended as the main event. There was actually a couple different shows here where I was kind of doing the research where it was almost the better part of like 6 months where the heavyweight championship was not the kind of final event. You can look at, going back to Royal Rumble, the title was vacant, but then WrestleMania a couple weeks before this, the main event was Hogan and Justice, which was not for the belt. And the kind of the Savage and Flair match was in the middle of the card for the heavyweight title. You kind of jump forward to that summer. In SummerSlam, again, the Intercontinental title was the main event on that one. It was the Bulldog and Bret Hart, where you had the Warrior and Savage. What are your thoughts on this? What title?
Wax handle onto the outside on Shawn, the bumping machine, man. Crowd going crazy. Love it. All right, so go ahead, ask your question.
What are your thoughts on like kind of where the title should fall and kind of laying a card out? Do you have any kind of strong feelings one way or the other that should, at Mania, most recently we saw it kind of headline the 2 nights, but what are your thoughts on where it should fall?
I have no idea. I have no issue with the world title not being the main event, right? Because to me, it's like, it's okay if you have multiple, like, big things, right? So like this particular show, Sherry and Liz now kind of wrestling a little bit. I mean, and Savage going after Sherry, just grabs her by the head. I mean, obviously it doesn't age well, but I mean, Sherry was just a bumping machine at this point, and
wrestling loose term. Yeah. Sherry just kind of shaking Elizabeth, and then Elizabeth leaving now.
Yeah. Elizabeth bails. I don't mind the world title not being last. Like, I like the idea of this show where it's like, man, in the middle of the show, and I'm getting a world title match. It's going to go 20 minutes. Plus, I'm getting the hometown hero in the main event, the Bulldog. So when something makes sense to finish the show with, like a WrestleMania with The Undertaker, even if he's not in the world title match, cool. Like, I have no issue with that at all.
And I think we most recently especially saw it with what the 35 with Seth and Brock leading things off. Like, that was worth it. That, and it kind of made sense on a card. And I think, I see a lot of websites out there that kind of, we did it a little bit like plan a card and kind of lay out a card with the titles and things like that. I agree with you. I think like, especially to keep kind of things hype. Like in this too is one where, Michaels, it didn't need to be the main event because you do wonder like kind of how well it would have gone over, especially even if you just flip this card and you didn't put the Bulldog last, I kind of have to give that opportunity to kind of, the big match like that, it wouldn't have gone over as well and the crowd would have been dead after the fact.
Well, keep in mind the timeline on this one, right? So this is April of '92. Just 5 months prior is when the barbershop took place. So, to your point, he just became the Heartbreak Kid, but it's just crazy to think that an angle that still to this day is talked about as one of the best, the barbershop, Shawn turns on Marty. You didn't get that match at WrestleMania because Marty Jannetty was such a fuck up. I mean, it's just crazy. Like, you missed I'm not saying it would have main evented WrestleMania 8, but, I mean, that's an excellent grudge match in those two, they would have had a phenomenal wrestling match as well. It didn't need a title. It just would have been a phenomenal grudge match. So we really got cheated on that. But, yeah, this is still Shawn just becoming the Heartbreak Kid, just starting to find the character. Sherry obviously added a lot to it. But, here he is in a world title match, on a European tour, getting a pretty damn good payday.
Yeah, and this is one that I agree. It's just interesting, especially seeing like, and we've done it over the course of the show too. Like just some of these young guys, I say young bucks, these young guns that kind of get in the opportunity. And we talk about a lot, like using the U.S. title, using the Intercontinental title as that kind of middle ground belt. It could even be a stepping stone. Like really, they obviously saw something in Michaels to kind of give him an opportunity like this.
Oh, absolutely. Just remember the stuff that him and Marty were doing, though. There was no one else doing the high flying stuff. I mean, they were just so far ahead of almost everyone on the roster of the stuff they were doing. And I'm sure that people already knew Michaels was a little bit of a character backstage. They knew that, with the right gimmick, he'd be fantastic. I love these Shawn tights, though, by the way. They're still some of my favorites. And he wore these tights most of 92, it seems like. So I think he had the same ones on when he won the Intercontinental title. But, he just that kind of red with the little marks or whatever. So, this was an interesting year in 92 because think about the world title, right? We enter the year with it being vacant, right? So end of 91, you had the Hogan, Undertaker, Flair helps Taker cheat. Then Tuesday in Texas, Taker loses the title to Hogan, but then they strip it. So it ends up that it's vacant. Royal Rumble, Flair wins it. Then Savage wins it at WrestleMania. Then, SummerSlam 92, you had that bullshit Warrior Savage like DQ finish, Flair's involved. It just made no sense. Then Flair wins back the title on a nothing show from Savage. Then Brett wins the title in a nothing match. And it was just odd, man. Just a really odd year for sure.
Well, and Brett won that one at a house show.
Savage going back up to the top again for another double axe handle. Second one of the match. God, I love when he does that.
Don't see it anymore. Like we were talking about this last week. Like it's just or whatever. Week 2.
And the way they always shot at the camera angle too, it always looked like he was so high. It just looked so dangerous. And again, it stood out because guys weren't doing that all the time. Now you see a dive out of the ring and it's like a hip toss.
Well, and I read an interesting article. It's been quite a while. I forget when it was, maybe a year ago, about like how New Japan films versus how like WWE films. And like New Japan uses like low angles, like almost like kind of where they're at behind Sherry right now from the floor, because it does make them look so much bigger in the ring. Double axe again. 1, 2. Nope, kick out.
And we have Gorilla and Bobby on commentary. Another great thing about this show. Oh yeah.
But yeah, just like those little changes that could make them look bigger than life. Like you're right. Like he looks huge. He looks like he's so high up, like in some of those axe handles when they're on the ground, because it's just how he was. It truly gave it that really cinematic feel.
Nice reversal there by Shawn. Another thing and both men hitting the mat. I love it. Another thing that's interesting too is, when you were a kid, do you remember like paying attention or caring about the work rate?
Oh no,
me neither. And I'm not saying it doesn't matter, but it's a super kick. Before the super kick was the finisher, I believe, if my memory serves me correct, Pat Patterson, because he was doing the super kick. I think they called it like a crescent kick. He was doing that as a setup for like his kind of weird suplex or whatever that he would do to finish guys off. And I think Pat Patterson was like, your finisher is the super kick, right? Like that's the better move. It's kind of interesting. So now Shawn body slam going to the top rope here. If I think I keep seeing a kid in the front row flipping Shawn Michaels off and yelling at him. You have to pay attention to that. That's pretty funny. Yeah, I noticed that a few times.
So
Shawn top rope, and this is when Shawn would do the fist drop off the top rope. Of course, later on in his career, that would become the elbow drop.
It seemed like such a basic move too, but like, and Macho rolls all the way to the outside, trying to get ahead. Is the kid on the left or right? Where are we looking?
I think it's the kid in the white shirt that's right by Savage.
Okay.
He was really laying into Shawn pretty good.
That's funny.
There he is.
Whoa. Welcome to Steel
I always used to love that when they had the horn on. They were just honking they do like the horn in the UK shows. Like they had that SummerSlam 92 as well. It's like at soccer matches, like kind of the same thing.
And so I just realized too, if you those not watching, so that's probably a good 8 inches between the padding and the floor. Oh, huge punch from Sherry to Macho Man's throat.
I mean, that's why I love managers, right? They just add that whole other element to the matches, a good heel manager.
And they really, ring us, whatever or valet, whatever they call it, like different things now. Like, yeah, and it is. And I've said it and always, for a long time now, like bring like the stables and have a manager. Like,
I've even been a fan on Raw recently of Selena Vega.
She was great. I managed to catch her a couple weeks ago. They've got a little, that little team going with Angel and a couple
Umberto.
Umberto. Yeah, and like it's kind of a revolving door. Austin Theory, stuff like that. So yeah,
but it's good. It's something different. My goodness, it's just nice.
Can you imagine this whole time that Brock, even if you just take like the last 2-3 years, if Brock has had to work the mic versus Heyman? Like, how much different would that program
I don't even know how you keep him relevant without having a mouthpiece.
Right. You and I probably say more words in this show, like this one show, than he has in the last couple of years sometimes.
Well, you don't need Heyman ringside for the matches, but it's just the mouthpiece that you need him for. But this is kind of the opposite, where Sherry's just adds so much to the matches.
And I think like my favorite Brock line over the last few years with the Heath Slater when he's like, I don't give a shit about your kids. Like, that was good. But those are those are the types of lines. Like if he drops one of those every couple of months, let Heyman do the heavy lifting. Yeah. Like that's fine. Like, however you feel about the in-ring and kind of him having belts, but you can't deny that that's been really good. Like, and that kind of, the work product here.
You know what I like about this building is wait till you see the main hard cam. It looks like the fans are just right on top of the ring because they're slightly elevated just a little bit. And it just looks like they're right on top of the action, which is pretty cool. Ref bump.
Oh, boy, he took it hard on that one, too. I agree. It's got like a little slight incline. I like, the setup is just interesting, yeah. So Hebner just getting laid out by Macho Man there after a ring whip. Or, yeah.
Yeah, I just love the way they have the crowd position. It just looks like they're right on top of the ring. Going for the body slam onto Shawn. Boom. Shawn, the bumping machine even back then, really selling it. What's Sherry going to do to Hebner down on the ring there? Oh, here you go, Savage. Machoing up.
Machoing up, yep.
I always love how disheveled Macho looks by the end of the match, especially later on in his career.
The hair, yeah. Absolutely. So
body slam. Is he setting up for the elbow drop? What's going on here? Ref's still out. Uh-oh. Looks like he's going for bombs away here.
Nobody checking on Earl.
The best elbow drop in the history of the business. You think one of the referee's colleagues would come down and help him out?
So Macho... 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Nope, Michelle.
Sherry attacking. Hey, Gorilla wants Randy to punch Sherry in the mouth. Again, I'm not saying that this ages well, okay? Crowd just going nuts. They're all on their feet now. Hebner finally comes to. Now he's going to the pin. And he kicks out.
So
nuts here.
We talked about it briefly in the build. What are your thoughts? Where would you rank Macho in?
Macho just spit at Sherry. She ducked it. So now the baby face is, hit and spit at the woman.
Where do you rank Macho in your commentators? We talk about, some other ones, but, what are your thoughts on just kind of, he was in the ring and doing some commentary, Elizabeth coming back. What do you think?
I like Macho on commentary. I like that he could still work a match if he needed to, which I always thought added another element, no different than like Lawler later on in his career. So I always like that. But I love when a former wrestler's on commentary. I'd rather listen, crossbody, 1, 2. Didn't get him. Savage pissed off at Sherry there. I like when a former wrestler that was like a main eventer's on commentary. I like a Mick Foley. I like a Randy Savage. I like a Mr. Perfect. I like these guys that are on commentary, because they add an element. To me, that's a lot more interesting than, having Corey Graves. Once that flip 2 count. Boom. I mean, they're moving at a pretty damn good pace here. This has been a fantastic match.
It's picked up in the last couple of minutes and is like, my brother and I joke like we're finally cooking.
Boom. Savage with the cross body sprints up the turnbuckle and hits him with it for the 3 count and gets the win. Macho wins. HBK keeping his heat right now. The heel attacking him after the match. What a good match. Now Sherry takes off the high heels and she's going to hit Savage with them. Boom, misses it. Look shot. Place going crazy. Double noggin knocker coming. Sherry and cue the music. Here comes Liz. Final WWF appearance. Dude, place going nuts. Macho was just over, man. Fans just loved him. He's got the world title, classic Winged Eagle, of course. That was fun.
And they still got 4 more matches after this, too. So a good way to kind of break the card up. But you almost wonder if it was like an intermission, and then they kind of gave him a little break at this point. But
to do those intermissions, they may still have house shows. They used to do that. That's right. Look at that. Winged Eagle belt. Crazy out from the Macho Man. Puts the belt on Liz. Hoists her up. I mean, look at that. They love it.
Good stuff. Absolutely.
And I know Vince wanted to go younger. I get it. But, man, give me this throughout 92. Give me Macho Man all year long. Then maybe the Macho Man loses to Yokozuna at the end of the year or even at WrestleMania 9. I know it's more complicated. Look at the fans just on top of the ring too. I know it's more complicated than that because I don't know if Savage wanted to work a full schedule and they all had to work a full schedule then. And I get that there's a lot of moving pieces, but let me just fantasy book it and say I wouldn't have hot-shotted the title back on the Flair, then on the Brett, then on the Yoko, then on the Hogan, then back on the Yoko. I mean, God, it was just the world title during this time period. They just did not do it well, but man, it's great to see Savage as champ. So, Jeff, I'm going to kick it back to you, and let's get into the aftermath.
Ho! It's time for the aftermath.
Yeah, good stuff on this one. And so, like we kind of said, just unusual to me, like kind of where this match fell and kind of what was happening and things like that. And so, but either way, you kind of had this one. And so, but a good match either way. So, after this, of course, you had the Savage Flair match back at WrestleMania, but their feud really kind of kept continuing. And like Tom said, we touched on at the beginning of the show, this was actually Elizabeth's, it was her final WWF appearance. Now, it seemed kind of odd and, the behind the scenes kind of things that were happening because, like we said, too, this event didn't actually air. It was actually WWF Primetime Wrestling. This was the kind of 2-hour block of wrestling that we would get. It was before Monday Night Raw was a Monday Night Raw thing, but it was a 2-hour long show. It was on USA Network that they would put on. And over the years, it evolved different ways of like, sometimes it would be this kind of pre-taped matches and things like this and showing different things. Is by the end, it was kind of like the panel of people where you had, just different people, all kinds of stuff, and Vince was moderating it. It was definitely interesting, but it was kind of out there. But this was, at the time, and then after it aired in June, this was her really last appearance. Now, because as this, we would later find out, we didn't know at the time, there was kind of two pieces to this. Of one, there was the actual like Savage and Elizabeth getting a divorce, and that was actually happening behind the scenes. But then Flair and Savage were actually using it. Well, Flair, however you want to cut it, was actually using it as part of the storyline to reveal, again, Vince using that real life stuff. It's when it works the best. But that, Flair or Elizabeth had, cheated with Flair. He had doctored some photos. That was kind of, how it had, come out after the fact. And it was actually interesting because, bless you. Oh my goodness.
Apparently the mute button doesn't work on my microphone.
That's good to know. All right. So that cough button on the radio. Yeah, we missed it. So, but it was interesting because it was actually WWF magazine. And remember, this is when kayfabe was alive and well, actually posted a statement about their divorce. And so, which
really
at the time, and I meant to try and find it. I couldn't find it, but it was really a very unusual thing. And so, the Savage Flair stuff kind of happened through really September of that year. But after it was announced, it didn't come up again. And so for whatever reason, like just odd to me, like why they would announce it. And I'll try and find it. We can kind of share it on our Twitter. For everyone, but it just, announcing something like that in the magazine, especially with kayfabe being what it is, just weird. So we have that. So it was really though, Savage though kind of feuding as well too through 1992 with the Ultimate Warrior. The Warrior had come back and they went back and forth, a lot of different things. And of course, Savage feuding with Flair as well too. And so a lot of different things happening with them. Michaels, on the other hand, though, he ended up going on. He won the Intercontinental title from Bret Hart in the the ladder match that was later that year. As well as having just is the start of his career as HBK is really what it was. And so he actually wouldn't win the heavyweight title for another couple of years. He had a lot of different kind of belts and things, but I thought that was kind of interesting that he didn't, he had this match and it was kind of, the first one in 1992, he didn't actually win the belt. It was the Iron Man match in WrestleMania 12. And so kind of a long time, I say a long build for him, and of course he had some other belts and did a lot of things in that time in between, but really interesting. I thought how that kind of played out. And then of course the return.
So you're saying like, isn't it crazy to think that it took 4 years for a guy to between the time he started having some title matches to the time he actually got the title, that long build and how we missed that. I mean, gosh, Drew McIntyre feels like the first guy in forever to have that true, like, lengthy build to becoming a world champion, right?
Right, and he had to leave and come back. And so, and this is one I think you and I, we talk about it all the time too, like, and he had matches of the year. He had match of the year in 93, 94, 95, 96. Like he had that long stretch that we've talked about before. Where we had all these matches of the year, but never really had the title at any point during that. But had a ton of different titles. And this, like you said, I think doing a good job of building, because we've said too on the show, you don't need the belt to make the man or the woman, whatever it might be. Like the Fiend, like he's dead, to both of us, I think at this point. So that's one that you didn't really need that. But, he had the Intercontinental belt for a while and losing it again, interestingly enough, to the returning after it, losing it in May of 93 to Marty Jannetty, actually. So, but then winning it back actually right around my birthday, early June of 93, with the help of who we've discussed before, his bodyguard, Diesel. So, just kind of, a lot happening for these guys. Macho Man kind of, had established his career and been there for a while. Shawn Michaels, like at the time, not knowing what he would go on to do, but like years before he would get like the top of the mountain. But once he got there, though, along the way, a lot of good stuff that happened for him and all those matches of the years and just kind of fun things. So, Tom, what are the thoughts you got about the aftermath?
I alluded to this a little bit during the match, but man, these are, and this is obviously nothing against the Macho Man, but this to me is the dark days of the WWF title. And here's what I mean by that is, I mean, growing up, obviously, you had the Hogan championship reign. Savage had it for a year. Warrior had it for a year. Slaughter briefly had it before Hogan got it back. Like, it made sense, right? I mean, you could nitpick at it, but for the most part, from 84 on through the first, 7 WrestleManias up until the 91, the world title made sense, right? And that was the guy. But man, this is a brutal stretch that went on for a while where, you did the Taker Hogan thing that sucked. Then, the Royal Rumble and Flair winning was obviously a great moment, but then boom, now you're putting it on Savage. And then, you didn't really have a great challenger for him. And you had the Warrior match, which babyface back then, it just, it didn't work there. I mean, it worked for Hogan Warrior, but it just didn't work in this scenario. Then you have, Flair winning the Hot Shotted title, then Brett winning the Hot Shotted title. Brett never really got that WrestleMania moment of winning the title for the first time, although they did crown him at the end of 10. Then you have it on Yoko, which, again, I thought Yoko was a great big man, but as a world champion, I don't know. You tried to get Luger involved in it. Diesel was not a great world champion. I mean, it was, I mean, to me, it's like it took a number of years before the world title, made it back to what I would call an interesting champion of Shawn Michaels, because, he had a great run of matches that year after he won it. But I don't know. Again, this whole era, I love the players. I just don't like the booking, right? I mean, What's not to love about Savage and Flair and Warrior and Bret Hart and, a guy like Shawn Michaels in there and, perfect managing Flair. I mean, again, love the players, just hate the booking. Really, really poor during this era.
So before we jump on, and I shared the link with you in the note page that we have, but I did find an image. We will make sure to share it on Twitter. It is the scan of the page of them announcing the divorce in the WWF magazine 1992. Very interesting here, and it's made out to look like Randy Savage's handwriting.
You got to read this.
It is a fact that Elizabeth and I are divorced, and I would like to go on record right now to say that this is nobody's fault. It's just one of those things that didn't work out. The next thing I want to say is, Elizabeth, I know you're out there and reading this. Please remember that in my heart, I will always love you, Randy Savage. And then there's an interesting kind of like just little blurb here. That was what Randy wrote, but then there was a little kind of message, a personal message from Randy Savage to his fans. For several months, fans have speculated over the marital status of the Macho Man Randy Savage and Elizabeth. Now, WWF magazine sadly reports that the couple has divorced. Understandably, both parties wish to conduct this most personal of processes privately, even though they just published it in a magazine. However, with the divorce finalized, Savage expressed a need to communicate directly and honestly with his many followers. Here is the handwritten statement he delivered to this publication, which has really nice handwriting, if that's truly his butt. And so
beautiful penmanship, yeah.
It really is, yeah. So, and it's got a photo of Elizabeth in her giant wedding dress and Macho, of course, in his wedding attire with the tassels. And then there's a little blurb that's Randy and Elizabeth in happier times. And through the years, the staff at WWF Magazine has enjoyed many fond moments with the WWF's first couple. Now we wish both individuals the best of luck as they go on with their lives. Crazy to see this. I'm glad I found it. And just like, I'm sure Macho had some pull to do something like that, but just interesting. So just fun. So, all right. So Tom, you got, before we get into the write-ups, you got any other kind of final thoughts, or we'll get into that?
No, jump into the right. I'm surprised you found a write-up of this one. I'm excited.
I am too. And so I will say this, that it's very brief, but again, we've been kind of adding it to the show, the PWI, no matter how you feel about it. So 1992, Savage was actually number 2 in the PWI 1992, and Michaels was number 16.
So if he was 2, who was 1? Was it Flair?
I don't know. I'm actually going to pull it up again real quick because I don't know.
Or Sting, maybe? Sting. WCW? Was that who it was? Okay.
Sting. Flair was 3. And then Rick Rude, a huge jump from 26 the year before to number 4. So interesting how that played out. So and the following year, Shawn Michaels jumped way up to number 3. So Michaels went from 16-3 between 92 and 93. So interesting how that played out. And I don't know if Macho is even on the list. Randy Savage dropped to 28 from number 2. So interesting how that played out. But I just, of course, I didn't find anything, and I kind of dug a little bit in between the PWI Torch and the Wrestling Observer newsletter. It wasn't a ton out there, but but this one, it kind of a long write-up I had found online, but it just kind of, Randy coming in with an injured leg at the hands of Ric Flair, very successful early, out wrestling Shawn and clotheslining him over the top. Sherry gets desperate and goes after Elizabeth to distract Savage long enough for Shawn to jump him from behind. Kind of gets into a little bit of a write-up, different things here. And so, kind of the close out the end, Elizabeth returns and yanks Sherry off the ropes as Shawn hits a sunset flip off the top for 2. Savage goes up, but Shawn has closed the distance, so he hops over him and comes off the other side with a crossbody for the win at 16-21. They didn't quite have the chemistry here I was hoping for, but it's still a good match. Shawn didn't quite have his single style down yet, but he'd taken off like a rocket the following year, which true. So this write-up gave it 3 3.25 stars. Which, yes, interesting. There was not a ton of write-ups on this one, especially, it from the time. A lot of them are kind of go back and watch the VHS or things like that. But interesting how this. So, Tom, I'll throw it to you first. What are your thoughts on this one? What's your score? Where are you sitting at?
Yeah, it's interesting in terms of Shawn not really finding his footing yet. It's one of the things that I think lacked is, his offense wasn't where it would get to, right? I mean, his selling was still great even back then. But what would really improve for him was his offense. And so that would come later. Look, I mean, there's no massive build to this, right? It's just a match, but because of the players, because we never really got it on a big stage, I think it was important for us to cover it. I'm really glad we did. Crowd was into it. 2 of the all-time greats. Only time we really got to see them work. Good in-match kind of, getting Liz and Sherry involved. What it lacked, obviously, was, a massive build or any follow-up to it. But as far as the match and kind of my payoff score goes, I'm going to give this one a 7. I just thought it was rock solid. I mean, it wasn't out of this world, but it was really good and worth going back and watching. What about you?
Yeah, and I'm actually, because again, you and I texted you a couple days ago when we were talking about this, like, I didn't watch any of it, and I was kind of good, like, not finding any reviews kind of led me to, not really seeing or kind of knowing, like, kind of how the pacing of this one was going to go or anything like that. So that was one benefit of that kind of being like that. I'm actually going to give it a 6.5. I think that I was actually impressed with how fast these guys were working together. That was one of my big takeaways from this match. Just kind of sitting here watching it. There was very, very, if any, downtime, or very little downtime. And so I thought that part of it, because it made it that much better, and that they were like constant, and they worked a 15-16 minute match at a pretty high rate. And so, normally we wouldn't care about stuff like that, and I'd kind of overlook it, and it wouldn't be a big deal. But I think that, putting it where it is, I think that I had fun watching it because of how fast paced it was.
Yep.
And you forget, like, Macho had been around for as long as he had at this point, literally just coming off of like a giant match at WrestleMania, and then Michaels, and then just kind of doing what they do. I think absolutely just good stuff. It was fun. I was entertained,
As you like to say, you were sports entertained.
Yes, I was. So
good.
Absolutely.
This is a fun one.
Yeah, I'm glad you found this one. I'm glad that I think it was WWE or whoever shared it on Twitter, the ending. So we were able to kind of catch that. And I think that it made it worth it. And so just good stuff. Fun all around.
Awesome. Final
thoughts? Take us home here.
It was a fun one. We've been heavy on the we've been heavy on the Shawn and the Macho stuff lately, but that's okay. I'm looking forward to covering some WCW stuff. I know we have a fun summer planned. So, yeah, man, I enjoyed it. It was a good one. It was fun to watch this, and hope everyone enjoyed us going a little off the beaten path. We need to do this more often. It's fun watching this stuff. Again, I don't know how often we're going to do it, but I like watching stuff for the first time like this. So let's try and do it. And then let's also, hopefully, for our listeners as well, it's the first time they're seeing some of this stuff and getting exposed to it too. So that's all I have. And Jeff, I don't know what it is. I'm just feeling a little generous today. So I'm going to let you close us out.
Wow, this is crazy. I don't know how I feel about that. So, yeah, good stuff. Like Tom said, I think this is one where, Tom and I've been, we had noticed that we hadn't really done, I think our only WCW match was Pillman and Jushin Thunder Liger. And so excited. We've got a long list of about 30 plus matches that could really take us into the next year if we really wanted to. But we got some really great ones, some top fives, and we got some real stinkers too. So it just kind of exciting stuff. So I don't know about you, and one we hopefully will get to. I had forgotten that there was a Human Torch match, and so might be one that we get to. Who knows? So yeah, we will see what happens. But as always, appreciate everybody kind of listening, tuning in, subscribing. Like Tom said, give us those 5-star social media, and of course, thank you for joining us on The Payoff.